Hey, ScapeChatz listeners, this is Alan. I just wanted to come in here at the beginning of the episode for a content warning in regards to the discussion of Incubator, which is the first episode that we discussed this week. Pretty much at the point where we begin discussing the nature of Scorpius's birth, which is about halfway through the Incubator discussion, to the end, there is some pretty significant discussion of sexual assault and the show's portrayal of rape. If any of that is triggering to you, or you're the victim of something like that and you don't feel comfortable listening to it, feel free to skip ahead to the Meltdown discussion and don't feel pressured at all to listen back to that. We're just kind of trying to suss out our thoughts on a pretty controversial and complicated scene, but I understand that some people out there find that stuff very uncomfortable. So thanks again for listening, and with that in mind, enjoy the episode. Yo, listen up. Here's a story about a nurse Flora who lives on a prowler, and all day and all night, and everything was blue for her and her house and everybody around, because she ain't got nobody to listen to. Welcome to ScapeChatz episode 29. I'm Alan, and I'm joined as always by Magellan, the teenage hero. This week, we watched Season 3, episodes 11 and 12, Incubator and Meltdown. First up is Incubator, which was written by Richard Manning, directed by Ian Watson, and it aired July 13th, 2001 in the United States. Hi, Magellan.
Hey, Alan.
How are things? How did you feel about Incubator?
First of all, things are great. Really got those new hairs coming in on my body.
That's good. Always good. I'm proud of it.
Teens. Anyway, that's going on. The episode, by the way, my voice is cracking. The episode, by the way.
The episode aged me down to 13. I don't know how I feel about it. It's weird.
It's what you got to do as a hero of these people. You got to be one of them. Lead from within. I like the episode. Let's just say that. And that's going to get us to the rest of my opinion, which is to say that I didn't get as much out of it as I was necessarily hoping I would. There was a certain aspect of immobility in the Scorpius backstory that I was a little, I guess, disappointed. It's really too strong of a word because I did like it. It's not like I was sitting there like, ugh, you guys really messed this one up. You really just did not give me what I was looking for. That's not what it was. It's just like I liked what was there and I wanted more, I guess. So I think that's the ultimate takeaway for me from this episode, is that there were a lot of things about it that I enjoyed and I just wanted them to be expanded upon.
That's a fair opinion. And I agree in that it felt like there was a lot of things being attempted and then not a lot of them landed as hard as I wanted them to. Like specifically the Scorpius backstory stuff, while important and while efficient in setting up the conflict of Peacekeeper Wars and the future conflict of the show, felt like it was a little bit slow and kind of drip fed to us. But at the same time, there was this B plot that I didn't expect whatsoever with John or the John that's on Moya. And I found that stuff to be really interesting, and it was asking the kind of questions that I always like when Farscape asks, in terms of like, why do we stay here? Why are we together? And what is our role on this ship? Which it's interesting because we got a comment on a recent episode from someone who said that part of the reason they split the two Johns was so that they could have, and it's because they have two distinctly different goals in mind. So they function as two different characters, because Talon John wants to live with Aaron forever and like be her partner for the rest of time. And Moya John is pretty firmly 100% in the I want to go home vibe. Right. So in that sense, I felt like it really solidified what Team Moya's mission statement is, and managed to do that with the backdrop of also like us learning about why Scorpius is such a mean man.
That's true, because it's really the first episode where we get to see that Moya John character coming out as something distinct and something that's relevant to the larger narrative, because the last Moya episode was like not, it was Crazyville ghost, there are alien ghosts in our bodies.
Right. Ghost manta rays. But the episode starts actually with some like the setting up of the Scorpius plot before we're gonna have to like split these different types of things that are happening in the episode up, but it starts with
I would love to
yeah.
First of all, do we have a synopsis from the Illustrated Companion?
Look at you remembering the things that I constantly forget. I'm so proud of you.
Beep beep beep.
That's
I'm
actually
a robot.
Thanks, RoboJellin.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so this is the one paragraph summary from the Farscape Season 3 Illustrated Companion, and this will help guide our conversation. Although Scorpius' team of scientists is able to sustain a wormhole, anyone who tries to go through it is liquefied. When Kokura Strappa discovers that part of the wormhole technology is encrypted, his crew are thrown into a heated scientific debate. Linfer is so convinced that she can solve the phase variance, she volunteers to pilot the next test flight. In desperation, Scorpius inserts the neural chip into his own head and summons a Crichton neural clone. In order to make the clone understand the Scaran threat, Scorpius decides to reveal his origins. Meanwhile, Linfer's test flight is successful and she arrives near Moya. Fearing a trap, none of the crew wish to let her come on board, but for once, Pilot and Moya override their decision and allow Linfer to dock. Crichton is amazed to hear that she comes bearing the secret to wormhole travel. So, lots going on.
I think we can start with Moya's plot and just talk about that in isolation. Because the Scorpius stuff is kind of, it's complex and layered, and I think it's going to lead us to a more overarching conversation about like the show and the villains and all that.
Right. So basically, the stuff that's happening on Moya is we got Chiana and Dargo and John, the one that's on Moya, being introduced to Linfer, and what I found immediately cool about that plot is what the summary brings up, which is that it's the first time that Pilot and Moya have been like, y'all have been freeloading off of me for a long time. You don't get to make all of the decisions. Like, because Linfer comes on and they're like, oh no, it's on a prowler, it's on a peacekeeper prowler or whatever. We shouldn't trust it. And Pilot's like, it's a race that Moya and I like, so we're gonna go ahead and just let them get on. You can just like hang out with us, and your opinion doesn't matter as much. And we've been talking about how Pilot is sort of coming into his own as this sort of like person with an opinion and character that can make decisions over other people. And I feel like this was just another really, really good example of that, because it meant that the conflict was not only between the crew and Linfer, but also like the crew versus Linfer and Pilot and Moya, because we get a like pretty succinct sentence of like what Pilot and Moya want out of this whole deal, which is like, with the wormhole tech, they can go wherever they want and they won't be pursued by peacekeepers anymore, which means that they can just fly forever. And if we recall back to, I believe it was The Way We Weren't, the Pilot Origin episode, that's all he's ever wanted is to fly. And to see someone be like, hey, we have this for you, and it clears up all of your conflict. You just have to get rid of the people that are on your ship. And it calls into question like whether or not your loyalty matters more than the thing you want in life. And I think that is a very important conflict for them to be addressing now, as the major plots start to pile up. I don't know. I'm curious what you thought about all of that, though.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think what I was intrigued by was, we're seeing Pilot and Moya's ultimate motivation, because they have this ultimate mission that isn't always at the forefront of what we're thinking about, which is to explore the stars, like you were alluding to. And yeah, I think that that's kind of a really fascinating counterweight to what everybody else in the crew is trying to do, where everybody else wants to go home and Pilot and Moya want to kind of move out. And they're sort of fulfilling that with the crew, but in a way where they still feel trapped. So they're in like this inner space area, and then there's like the farther away space.
Right.
And so everybody in this crew is kind of stuck in the middle of the two places that they want to be. because all these other folks don't want to be drifting around. They don't want to be derelict. And then Moya and Pilot want to be actively adventuring instead of just floating around. So that's to me an interesting dichotomy of where these folks want to go.
It's a really interesting motivation for characters on a show to want to go off the grid, because I feel like as two folks who've graduated from college recently, like that is a very understandable motivation, is to just be like, well, everything here is hard and we're constantly being hounded by the powers that be. What if we could just leave and be off the grid and be able to just like move forever and go on an eternal road trip? And I love that about Pilot and Moya's goals here, because so much of the show is about travel and about escaping and finding out what's worth not escaping from and what's worth staying at. So like that's kind of what I'm getting at when I say that the B plot to me felt more cohesive and interesting, was like just that question turned a lot of gears in my head with the show that I hadn't thought about in a while. Like, oh, maybe there does exist a world where they can just escape, and that can be how their plot ends.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot lately about holding opposites in your mind as a way of building more engaging character motivations. So like there's this book where I kind of first encountered this idea. It's a book by this guy Michael Shurtleff called Audition, and it's kind of his advice for actors who are auditioning. And he has a number of different factoids. But one of them is that, and you could argue how accurate this is, but in terms of engaging acting, shyness is the desire to be bold, right? Like acting shyness is not acting the desire to retreat. It's acting the desire to put more out there, but you're being held back by something. So I was thinking about this in the context of this episode where like, they are all adventuring and moving around the universe, and John Crichton is actively learning about things and seeking things out, but for the want of returning to a place that he already knows and that he already is from. And that kind of keeps the plot in this dynamic place where we're still moving forward, but in a way where we have something that we're trying to get to. Because this show wouldn't really work if the crew was a bunch of people who were just running. Like if they were just trying to escape, then they would just be with Moya and Pilot running. And it would be a show about how they're running and they're being chased. Which the intro of the past two seasons would have you believe, like, I'm being hunted by a crazy military commander, right? Mm-hmm. But the show is so much more than being hunted. And that's what also keeps Moya and Pilot having a similar, like, deal with opposite motivations. It keeps them interesting as well. Because on the one hand, their motive is to like protect and nurture and serve the crew, but on the other hand, that crew is keeping them from the thing that they ultimately want the most.
I think it's important also to remember that this show, before it went to air, or at least like somewhere in the world at some point, it was called Space Chase. And we laugh about that name because it sounds like a funny, like silly, oh wow, Space Chase is a weird name for a sci-fi show. But the choice to call it Farscape, which is kind of a portmanteau of far and escape, is...
And also landscape.
Right. It says a lot more about what the show wanted to be as opposed to what it was in its early goings. Which I think led in part to feeling like even when the show was at its worst in seasons 1 and 2, like this show is gonna get somewhere. Like this is all getting to somewhere, and it finally has. And now it's like, now the questions are, what is a Farscape? Like, why are we trying to escape, and where are we trying to get to? At least on the Moya plots.
It's that notion of escape, and also the idea of landscape. Like ultimately, the show is about where you are and your relationship to the place that you are and the place that you are not. So that, I think that ties together the words escape and landscape, and maybe folks could chime in if there are other words that they think are playing into this title of Farscape. But yeah, it's a show that has always been preoccupied with place, with trying to learn about the place that you are, trying to love it, trying to escape it, trying to define it, all that sort of stuff. And I think this episode definitely kind of brings all of that feeling back to the fore in a way that's going to help us moving forward through the rest of the season.
And moving on within this plot also, I think that the plight of Linfer is related to all of this because she wants to use the wormhole to get away, and she finds Moya and says like, oh, the reason I was able to go through the wormhole and not like get dissolved is I have something, I guess, in my physiology, if I understood it correctly, like this like neural or whatever, there's like a word for it. She basically has like the ability that makes it so she doesn't get killed by the wormhole, she doesn't get dissolved by it. And so she says, wow, that gives me the ability to go through these wormholes and not get dissolved. I can give y'all the technology to do this. And so we're enticed by that, but like on any other show, the question wouldn't be like whether or not that's legit, it would be whether or not they take it. And it is that for a while, but because it's Farscape, the sort of end result of all of this is that she realizes, oh wait, the thing that I have only worked for a little while. I'm now dissolving in front of you. Like, I had a delayed reaction. So it's sort of like that episode from season 1 where they were like all offered the star charts that could help them avoid peacekeepers. And then it was like, oh no, we broke it and it was never real anyways. That I feel like is another very distinctly Farscape thing, is to like offer the thing that people want and then have them question whether or not they'll take it, but then end the episode with being like,
take it away. Yeah,
exactly. Like you never had the option to take it. It was going to fail you before you even got to have it.
Kind of like that's something we talked about in the context of Dargo in the Flax, where he had that kind of that BioWare choice moment of like Aaron and John are suffocating on this ship, but that ship over there has data that could bring me to Jothi.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot of that kind of stuff.
So the show does do it multiple times.
Does anything else happen with Linfer and them though? It is a lot of that like talking back and forth. I didn't write down a lot of quotes for this episode. I took surprisingly sparse notes on it just because I felt like it was a lot of good dialogue.
I was intrigued by the philosophical stance that Dargo was put into in this episode, because now there is a question around Dargo of what is he after, because he's had his plot of trying to go home in a certain sense with Jothi, right? Like that was his ultimate driving motivation, was to find his son and form a family with his son, and that has failed.
Yeah.
And so now Dargo's here, and what does Dargo want? And he's kind of, I think, falling into a similar position that Aaron was falling into, where he's becoming comfortable on the ship and thinking of the ship as like his home to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And so now he's playing the role that Aaron was playing when she was still on Moya, of like being the counterweight to John's desire to go home, where it's like, well, what about what you have here? So he's not only taking this role where it's like, calm down about the wormhole stuff, just cool it, like you're getting obsessive and you're getting crazy. Then he's also taking the stance of, think about the other people on the ship. Chiana and Jewel are like going to tear each other's heads off, and they need some shore leave. So I thought that exchange was, even if it was a little patronizing, of like, come on, John, the ladies are going crazy. There is now this new Dargo where he's trying to kind of be the patriarch of this ship, and be respectful and empathetic towards people's needs. So he's trying to kind of create cohesion in this crew now that he doesn't have this sort of outward moving motivation.
In a way, you could argue that he's trying to play the Zahn in some respects, because he's trying to keep people together, and like that is what he has to live for. And like you said, I think regarding the same conversation, he says to John, if you're going to be as sour as an unmated flibisk, I will go away. And I'm also going to say that I'm really bummed that I didn't think to call you that at the beginning. But now you're an unmated flibisk. So John says, what's a flibisk? And he says, it's a 10-legged creature about this big, very tasty if prepared right, but if you prevent it from mating, it gets very disagreeable. And then John says, hell, who doesn't? Which is a great, like, perfect John Dargo line. But then it's like, it's the, again, very Farscape thing of like comedy followed by sadness, because the next line from him is, you ever think we've been on this boat way too long? And Dargo says, constantly. But so far, all the other alternatives have been worse. And it's just like, oh my god, like there's nothing. And then John says, well, here's to that changing. You know, they could get off at some point, but whether or not they want to, because Dargo's kind of accepted, like, well, everything else kind of sucks. Maybe we're fine here. And John's like, maybe we can find something better. You know, it's almost like do we want to settle for good enough but safe, or do we want to risk finding a perfect life out there somewhere? So even between the two of them, there's this like really great back and forth debate about what we want to do with our time and where we want to live.
Right, exactly.
I think that covers most of the B plot, though. Where did you want to go from here? What do you think is a good place?
I want to talk about like Scorpius's friends. Just give him a rundown, and then we'll get inside of his brain.
We're gonna dive deep into his head. Yeah.
Yeah. The name Kokura Strappa is great.
It's so good, and
that guy's little like anemone fish face is wonderful.
Yeah, he looks like there's like that gif of John Cena where it's his face smiling, and then it zooms the face in, like the like eyes and face, like that kind of pushes him in, and that's what Strappa's like halfway through that gif. And he also has like really sallow eyes, so he almost looks like a Monster Factory character. He's great. And he's got a funny voice and a funny affectation, and he's kind of like the scientist that's doing all of the research, and basically he's the guy that Scorpius can yell at right now. But I'd also definitely want to bring up Lieutenant Braca, because Braca is a character that we kind of like earmarked that we're going to talk about way more as the show moves on, because we've seen him since, I believe, season 1, since Bone to be Wild was the first time that he appeared. And Braca very early on was like, oh, this is the guy that says he's like Scorpius's yes man. But we're kind of getting into the like relationship between the two of them now. Like there's lines where Scorpius at the end is like very happy that Braca never pulled the plug on him, even though he was struggling when he was going inside his own head. And then Braca just like kind of becomes this Mr. Smithers character of like, I'm so happy that my boss likes me. And like he's like glowing. Like that's the end of the episode. Is Scorpius says like, oh, and then resume work, and he's like, cybernetics verifies neurochips were destroyed, and he's like, will that be all, sir? It's this very like it says so much about their relationship. Scorpius is like, your recent performance has been exemplary. Braca says, thank you, sir, I was concerned I made the wrong decision. And Scorpius says, Nurse Froy made the wrong decision, yours was correct. He says, thank you, I hope my conduct continues to find favor. But he's like, it's like the first time we've seen him smile. He gets a little bit of a smile, and he's like, yeah, I made the boss happy. Yeah,
Braga's such a good boy.
He's a perfect little charisma boy. He's a flawless human being. He tries so hard. Because I can imagine getting scared in that situation of like, if I was responsible for Scorpius's death in that, I would be wrecked forever.
Right.
And it's basically him kind of in conflict with Nurse Froy, which is an amazing name. And she's a character that we haven't seen before, but she is, I think, the first character played by an Asian actress on the show. I might be completely wrong. She's great. She's got a really cool style. She's got like blue eyes, blue hair, blue everything. Dabba dee dabba die, you know. That whole just, she's got that whole, yo, listen up. Here's a story about a Nurse Froy who lives on a prowler, and all day and all night, and everything was blue for her and her house and everybody around, because she ain't got nobody to listen to. She gets punched in the face. Yeah. It's the end of her character. Yep. She's so great, and she's that Farscape thing where you're like, oh, you're so cool, what do you do, what's your story? And then she's like, you need to take Scorpius out of the thing, and Braca socks her in the face, and she's knocked out. Never seen again. Bummed me out, because she was awesome.
I so loved the moment where Scorpius bursts out of like John has refused him for the final time.
Yep.
And Scorpius is overheating like crazy, and he sits straight up. The thing pops out, and Braca's there like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
Yeah, it's the first time we've seen Braca rattled, and he's completely rattled.
He was so scared. He touches the thing. He's like, oh, that's hot.
Hot. Chops it, and there's still like the most blood ever on the thing. But he like pops a new one and then like slides it in and barely gets it through, and he's like, It again, the like mechanics of Scorpius's head situation I find really interesting, and just really like someone has to be very sensitive and delicate to keep with you, to keep you alive.
Right, exactly.
I love that about him.
Yeah.
And in that exchange... Oh, sorry, yeah.
No, I was just going to say that scene had the kind of chest-tightening, nervous energy for me of the scene in Pulp Fiction where they inject the adrenaline shot into her chest.
It's very... Yeah, it's actually very reminiscent of that. Yeah.
Yeah. That seems sort of like, oh my god,
like stressful intimacy, I guess you could call it. Where you're just like, oh fuck, he's got to stab him. But in that exchange, though, Braca, like the neural chip is broken, so Scorpius can never do any of that again. But he's like, it's fine. I got what I needed out of him, even though I got nothing out of him. I like know what to do from here. You're like, oh fuck, Scorpius like knows something based on the shit that he got out of John in that little exchange. Oh, no, because he saw, like, some of the code. That's what it was. He got, like, enough of the code that he's like, yeah, I get it. Or of the wormhole tech.
That I didn't get. I guess we'll talk about that when we talk about the Scorpius' mind part, but I didn't get why he was able to see the code or what that meant.
It's in my code! It's in my code! I watched that video again recently. It's amazing. People, just look up Kanye West, Zane Lowe, Wreck-It Ralph. There you go. You'll find that video and you'll know what I'm talking about. What did you not get about that though? Oh, like how he was able to see it?
Yeah, because it sounded like he was getting new information from John, and I was under the impression that the only way to get new information was to convince John that it was a good idea to give him things, but he didn't convince John,
and then John like leaked out information by accident.
Yeah, I guess maybe the point is that John was somewhat conflicted. Yeah. And so that yielded information. If somebody has an explanation for the exact logic of that scene, I would really appreciate it. Because I wasn't sure. Yeah. I wasn't sure if also Scorpius was like trying to re-find something simple that they'd lost that they could have found before. But it seemed the way that Kokuro Strappa was like, yes, I can do the math in my head, means that it was new math.
It is, I think it was basically like he had a moment where John relented for just enough to let some of the code, and the way they visualize it is cool because he's like looking at it the way that like Neo looks at the Matrix kind of, and he's like, I'm seeing,
a little bit,
I'm seeing all these numbers, and then he gets that scene where he's like saying all of it out loud to Strappa. And I can't find that line, but it's really fun to just like hear him say all these weird. Oh yeah, he's like Vulcan 9, Exponent 9, Devera 4, 3, 1, Equivalence Mastered 9, Polonic Square. You're like, what?
It's like so Wayne. Okay, you got it, buddy. I wonder if I guess all that was scripted as he said it, right? He wasn't just like freestyle jazzing it.
That's a good question actually. It'd be really funny if he was just improvising science bullshit. I would assume that it was written. But, so now they have something related to the wormhole tech. Uh-oh. That's moving the big A-plots forward of the show.
That's getting that plot real happening.
But I think we should at least get towards, at this point, the last major plot point of the show, which is the backstory of a young man who goes by the name of Scorpius.
Right. So we're on stage at a Black Sabbath concert.
Yes.
And Scorpius and John are there.
Yep.
And
Iron Man has just finished.
Iron Man has just finished. So now they're taking a little time to do some of their new material. And they got a little video slideshow to go with it.
Yep.
That's the bit. That's all I have. He watched it. He's showing John his past as a little kid.
I was going to say that you were going to say that he took John onto the Crazy Train. I can write these jokes for you, man, if you need help.
That wasn't a Black Sabbath song.
Crazy Train?
I thought that was an Ozzy Osbourne song.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure then. I was like, no, obviously you dummy, and then you hit me with the solo artist.
I don't know. Anyway, I don't know music like that. It's been a while since I played Guitar Hero.
Remember Guitar Hero? Oh. It was an Ozzy Osbourne song. You're right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So we see Scorpius telling John all about how the Scarens were really mean to him. Because they were really mean to him. So it started when he was a kid. First 12 years of his life, he was like experimented on and all this stuff. Just pure horrific bad times. He was a combination Scaren-Sabatian hybrid, the first of his kind. And these Scarens are trying to figure out, well, what do we do with this guy? So after those first 12 years, right? Then that's when he starts hanging out with the Scaran lady.
Tauza? I believe so,
Tauza?
yes.
Yeah. So Tauza is like a Komodo dragon with lipstick. And
yes, you're exactly right.
Yeah, that's not even figurative language.
Yeah.
She's trying to toughen him up, basically, telling him that the Sebacean parts of him are impure, they're weak, he needs to overcome them mentally. And we learn later that the suspicion on the part of the Scarans is that there is some benefit to this hybrid physiology, otherwise they wouldn't have tried to create it. But they don't necessarily know what it is. And they understand that there are clear defects, one of them being the heat problem that Scorpius has to deal with for his entire life. And they try to get him to overcome that mentally with some techniques, like she has a cup of water and there's a heat lamp in the room and it's like, come get the water. And then he tries to, and then she pours it on the ground and then calls him a whelp or worthless or something.
Right.
She's talking about how his skin, his hide is weak. And it's through this that he discovers that he has the power to sense people's heat signatures and tell if they're lying.
A very cool superpower.
Very cool superpower that other people don't have. That's the benefit of him being a hybrid.
We found it. That was the trick.
Yeah. And we also know from, what was it? From one of his first appearances back on the Gammak base, season 1, that he can also sense the signatures of like different species. Like he can tell what species you are based on your heat signature.
Right, they're all unique. You're referring to either nerve or the hidden memory, by the way.
Yeah, I believe nerve.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Thank you. So he figures that out. He figures out that she's lying to him because the story that he's told is that his mother was a Scaran and his father was a dirty Sebacean who did some bad things to his mom Scaran. And he's like, I don't necessarily believe that. So he breaks out as this little, what did he remind me of? He was like a shorn Ewok. Like that was kind of what the costuming reminded me of.
Yeah, with like lots of like layers of skin, like an old man, young person or something.
Yeah, exactly. So he's able to escape in a transport pod onto a commerce planet, and then survives somehow for long enough to get a cool leather suit and a little like Super Mario Sunshine backpack.
The Flood.
Yeah, Flood.
Yep.
To keep him cool. And then he tries to go to the Peacekeepers to be like, hey guys, I can help you fight these Scarans. They're like, we don't believe you.
He's like, no, really. I love Teenage Scorpius. I think he's one of the coolest designs.
Yeah, I wanted to see way more of him.
Because his costuming is a really interesting like reminder that although Scorpius's head cylinder is like really complex and delicate, it was worse before, and that's like a 2.0 of something that used to be really shitty, which was like he had a straight up tube connected to a backpack that he had to constantly wear. And he comes onto the ship with his like big old backpack like a little teen boy, and he's like, hey guys, I know some stuff. And they're like, do you really? And he's like, and he just melts, like any good teen does. But yeah, so where does he go from there?
Yeah, so from that point he uses, I guess he follows Peacekeeper information to try and figure out exactly the specifics of his parentage.
Yep.
And he finds out about a Peacekeeper settlement mission that was attacked by the Scarans, and everybody was killed except for two people, Sebacean Man and Sebacean Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And they're hanging out in this little ship. And then
that was a weird scene, by the way.
With the two beautiful blonde people.
Yep. I was just like, these don't look like Scorpius' parents. This makes no sense to me.
Well, I mean, just the mom was his
right.
parent. But yeah, they were very much too pretty.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was kind of like a weird, like we'd sidestepped into the movie version of a weird romance novel.
Right, because they're like sitting on these sleeping bags on the floor, and they're like, "Oh man, like we're gonna be safe. There's no way this can be as bad as it seems." Right. And then ba-boom!
And then it's Halloween. Here I am. I'm in a bad costume and I'm going to scare you.
A weird scaring, yeah.
Yeah. So that guy busts in, and now I'm going to stop making jokes because he murders the dude and captures the woman and rapes her.
Standing up. And it's disgusting. There's some stuff about that in the Illustrated Companion and how, like, they needed to show that, but they couldn't show a lot of it. So a lot of it had to be, like, implied. Because he basically, like, gets up on her and then it cuts away, which is a pretty, like, good way to do that, I guess. But it is important that it is non-consensual. You know, we've talked about, like, how this show handles sex and stuff. And, like, for Scorpius to be someone who's all about control was the product of non-consensual sex is really essential to understanding him. So it's rough, but they handle it as well as they could, I suppose.
Yeah, and it does help to understand Scorpius and his, like you said, his need to control the situation and to remain calm. And it also explains his, like, underlying rage. I don't know. The show has done, like, a few rape things before that kind of lessened the impact of this scene for me, and I don't know if that's unfair of me to think that. It probably is, because this is on a different magnitude than in the past. But it's like, I don't know. It's just I still don't know how to sort it all out in my mind.
What versions of something like this have we seen before? There was obviously the Crackers Don't Matter, like, implications of all of it.
I think we've seen other... I don't think we've seen other instances where, like, actual rape has happened, but I think we've seen... Dargo.
Yes, exactly.
You're right.
That's the one.
Yeah. And then several instances of, like, implication.
Yeah. And to be fair, the Dargo one is played for comedy. So it's like you played one for comedy and then a couple episodes later it's like, no, now take this deadly seriously.
This is like the most serious dramatic thing that has happened and is motivating, like, everything the villain is doing.
Right.
Which I'm not discounting that. I'm not saying that's a bad motivation for a villain. I'm saying that the other instances when it was played for comedy were bad and were cheapening the entire concept.
Right. It can't be used as a plot convenience of, like, oh, this explains why someone's grumpy or sad. It's like, you know, it should carry the weight that it does in this scene always, and it hasn't always carried this proper weight before. Which I agree, though, does, like, kind of make you go, like, really, another one of these types of scenes? And
I feel dirty about, like, thinking of it that way. You know what I mean?
In terms of thinking about it as a serious one?
No. I feel dirty thinking, like, oh, that didn't
land as hard as it could have.
Yeah, which doesn't, like, that feels really insensitive of me to feel that way, and I don't know where that's coming from. But there's something about the way that this show has been operating that makes that not quite work for me. And then the other aspect of it is, like, his point is the Scarens are barbaric.
Right.
And they need to be destroyed because they did something like this. But it didn't seem outside the realm of possibility for Scarens either, to me.
Exactly.
Like, I was, when the scene was going on, I was viscerally like, oh my God, that's awful. Like, I did feel that it was awful. You know what I mean? I wasn't watching that scene being like, man, this is all, like, my after the fact rationalization and intellectualization of it. But it did not shock me that a Scaren would do that, I guess. Yeah.
And yeah, because we're talking about it. We were talking about it in, like, how this reflects things that have happened in the past. But the whole goal of Scorpius telling the John thing inside of his head, that his whole backstory is, like, to convey that, hey, yeah, the Scarens are bad, and thusly we need your wormhole technology so that we can create weapons to kill them. they are bad. So he's othering the Scarens with this story.
Right.
Whereas I feel like a lot of the other scenes of implied and actual sexual assault on the show aren't used for a purpose like that. They're just used to like elicit a response. Like this is used to elicit a response in the viewer and to also like Scorpius is telling this story as a frame narrative to the John clone in his head to be like, hey, I need you to understand something and I need to tell you this really rough shit.
You know what it is, and also I just want to say like, if any listeners out there are troubled by the way that I'm going about discussing this, I understand that. I'm like trying to sort through a lot of reactions in my head about this material and these scenes, so I recognize that I'm quite often probably speaking from a position of insensitivity or ignorance, and I would love to be disabused of that. And I would love to hear what everybody else thinks about this scene also. Right. So forgive, like, if I'm trying to jump through verbal hoops to sort things out and avoid offending people, and I end up offending people, I recognize that is most likely something I'm doing, and I want to make sure that everyone knows it's not my intention and that I want to hear the way in which I'm wrong on this. Anyway, that said, I think the thing that's making it weird for me is that past instances of sexual assault, like you said, have been used in this show as a way of generating either comedy. So set that aside because we know that that's not cool.
Right.
Or in the case of Crackers Don't Matter, have been used to create emotional shock. Like it's been used just for shock value, just for a gut reaction shock without the further intellectualization of this is bad and therefore we should take some kind of action.
Yeah.
So it's trying to take this something that the show has used as a device to create emotional shock to then go a step further in what they're trying to accomplish with it. Yeah. And so it feels like it's hard for me to not separate the way that Scorpius is using or taking advantage of the situation for his own ends with the way that the show is appropriating the concept of rape and sexual assault.
Yeah. In a way, you could argue also that him using this to curry favor is not okay. And right. is like, it's that, even that, like the fact that it happens says something about Scorpius, but the fact that he uses it in his backstory says even more about Scorpius. And the fact that he is currying favor with John by being like, hey, not only did I like have a hard life, but like I'm the product of a horrible act. Like, don't you feel sorry for me?
Right. And that idea, like the base idea that is how Scorpius, that is the fact of his parentage, that works for me on the level of explaining a lot of his character motivation.
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm troubled by the way that Scorpius is using this event, and that's the point. Like I'm supposed to be troubled by that. We're supposed to see that Scorpius is, not, he is wrongheaded here, but it's again hard for me to parse. Like, is the show trying to say that Scorpius is wrongheaded in his motivations, or is the show trying to say, hey, turns out Scorpius isn't so wrong after all because the Scarens really are bad?
That's a really good point.
So that is what's troubling me, is I can't quite figure out which way they're going with this.
Right.
And I guess you could argue if John Crichton, for the most part, most of the time, is the moral compass of this show, and he's rejecting Scorpius's absolutism and his warmongering, that is the viewpoint of the show. But I don't know. Then what? Like, if we're seeing a Scorpius episode, then I would imagine part of the reason is to engender in us some degree of empathy for Scorpius in his situation. So I'm wondering how much I should walk away from this episode thinking like Scorpius is kind of justified.
The fact that, and I think this was really smart of the writers, that John leaves this episode and hasn't made a decision, or like basically says like, I don't want to do this. Like, so he straight up denies Scorpius and says, I'm not going to help you. Is that correct?
Yeah. He's like, the thing that he says, he reiterates something the ancients said to him, which is, if you aren't smart enough to figure out
I'll find the exact line.
Yeah.
You want.
Great. That'd be great.
If you're not smart enough to discover it for yourself, you're not smart enough to use it wisely.
Exactly. So Scorpius is trying to say, like, hey, I don't want wormhole stuff to, like, take over the universe. I just want to destroy the Scarens. And I do resonate with Scorpius on the level of the Scarens want to kill every other race. They're going to come in. They're stronger than us. We find out that they outnumber Sebastian or Peacekeepers 10-1. And they're already, like, very strong. And, hey, John, they're probably going to go to Earth next.
Yeah, they're going for your people.
Like, that is a fine argument for John to be like, oh, I have to protect Earth. And that's something interesting. But the way that Scorpius tries to model that they're bad is questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then also there's that fact of, like, the Scarens did this a lot. Like, this was not the only instance of a Scaren
right.
Forcibly raping a Sebastian woman.
Well,
this was just the only time in which it yielded offspring.
Yes, and it is revealed that the reason they're doing it is not, like, just to be malicious, but it's because they want to do genetic testing. So then it's like, well, now you're, like, not, like, you've broken down all ethical lines, and I can't even side with you on that. Because they want to test, like, if we can breed these two, can we create perfect super soldiers? And then the only one that lives through it is Scorpius. And he lived through it by killing his mother. Or, like, in childbirth, his mother died because of him.
Mm-hmm.
They make it a point to say that. But yeah, it's a question that we're going to have to come back to because we're going to talk more about Scorpius and the Peacekeepers soon. The last two things I wanted to mention about it were just that my fundamental problem with all of this is that we have not, to this point, learned that Peacekeepers aren't doing similar things. Like, we don't know what kind of nasty shit they're doing. We know what Scorpius is telling us, and we know what we learned about Aaron's past. Like, we know plenty of Peacekeepers, like, you know, Krace also, but we still don't know if the general Peacekeeper army is, like, doing... In fact, we know that they're pretty bad, because we saw what last week with Zalak's son, like, she killed her husband to curry favor with the rest of them. Like,
right, exactly.
They're not exactly, like, beacons of peace and goodness. And then, yeah, the other point was just that it's important for us to remember that John, the John clone in Scorpius's head, is specifically from before the end of season 2. It's the one that he takes out of John's head at the end of season 2, I mean. Right. So Aaron's son is dead, which means that he has no reason to want to stay here, so he cares more about Earth than our current John Crichtons do, or at least our like, Talon's John Crichton does. And he's not cloned yet, so it's just like, you need to remember that this is like, we're talking to an old John Crichton, and that Crichton knows way less about the Peacekeepers and Scarens and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So he's kind of talking to a slightly more ignorant version of John that we haven't seen in a very long time.
Yeah.
But I think that's the important part of Scorpius's plot to talk about. And basically it ends with him being like, yeah, and then I went back and I fought Tauza. And it's a kind of a cool fight scene because he, like, stabs her with some needles that she was using to hurt him, and then she gets up, like, she like Terminator style, like, is on the floor and then, like, floats straight upward, and you're like, whoa, shit. So she's cool, but then he just, again, like, completely kills her, and you're like, yeah, you killed your captor. Again, I don't know if I should feel happy about this, but I guess yay. And then, yeah, he basically... It does the, like, end of Animal House post-credits thing where it's like, Scorpius went on to work for the Peacekeepers for several years before working his way up until he eventually became the captain of this ship, and then we're in the present. So that is kind of where the second half of the episode goes.
Yeah. I would love to see a little, like, card for Lieutenant Braca. Like, it just freeze frames on him laughing.
Yeah.
And it's like, Braca went on to die. I don't know. Whatever he does.
We don't know.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that people enjoy our, like, we have not watched all of this show yet opinions, because that's kind of all we have over the other Farscape podcasts. Is like, this is our thing.
I hope Braca turns out okay.
Braca's all right. The Braca's gonna be all right. What's the movie I'm thinking of? The kids are gonna be okay.
The kids are all right.
The Braca's all right. There you go. You did it.
Like, if he ends up saving everyone, that would be
God.
amazing.
Or, like, face turn. Oh, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
Braca.
What if he has to like kill Scorpius somehow?
Oh
You
my
know?
god. There's definitely going to be like a profound, like, either he has to betray him or he has to make another significant moral choice. Because this one was like setting that up, right? Where he's like, oh, do I risk losing him or do I continue what he told me to do? And then he feels really happy that he continued telling him or doing what Scorpius said. So
Yeah, exactly.
we're definitely going to see something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And I think we're wrapping up this episode. Am I right? Oh,
yes.
Background info.
Well,
That's something we always do. Yeah. Once again, I really do want to strongly reiterate, like, if this conversation is triggering for you, or you feel like pieces of what we've said have been insensitive or wrongheaded or just incomplete, I really do sincerely want to hear your opinions on this episode. Truly, truly do. If I'm wrong, or I'm speaking about things in a way that isn't entirely precise, or any other critiques, criticisms, questions, comments that you have for this discussion, I really, really want to hear them.
Yeah, the best we can do as show hosts is be good listeners as well as good speakers. It's half of podcasting. And
yeah,
I'll put a content warning in the description of this episode for people, just in case. But also, talk to us. You know, we like to be talked to. Speaking of talking, John, would you like to talk at me the background information for this
I would love to. A certain couple of characters don't appear in this episode, but I'm not going to tell you who.
Fuck that.
This episode was another example of what Ricky Manning called eye pummeling after the events of DNA Mad Scientist and a Clockwork Nabari.
Eye pummeling is like
body horror, I think.
Yeah.
Director Ian Watson compared Scorpius' story to the legend of Tarzan, except that Scorpius is trying to escape his captors. That's kind of a fun comparison.
Huh, and that's relevant. Didn't a new Tarzan movie just come out?
Oh, at the time of that?
No, like right now in 2016.
Oh, right now? Oh, I don't know, I guess.
Yeah.
Evan Sheaves, who played the young Scorpius, was described by Watson as a nicely spoken, gentle boy. That's so nice.
There's good trivia about the young Scorpius.
Nice. Fiona Gentle acted as the lead puppeteer for the first time in this episode, doing the work with the female Scaran. That was cool. Their Scarans always have like this really creepy, otherworldly look to them that I like. Like, it's obvious that they are puppets, but in a way that I think is to the benefit of how creepy they are.
Yeah, what are they? The Scarans are like the most interesting because they've been changing also more than any other alien race's look has been changing over time.
Yeah.
Like we went from like one of them in the Princess Trilogy. We talked about this before, but like looks like a big dumb guy with a hat on. And now it's like each one is unique, and this one's got like a cool physicality to her, and all of that. I think the Scarans, because they're important, get a lot of amazing makeup work and creature shop killing it as usual.
A new set was built for this episode that was used in the episodes Into the Lion's Den, Lambs to the Slaughter, and Into the Lion's Den, Wolf in Sheep's Clothing at the end of the season. I'm guessing they're talking about Scorpius' lab.
Correct. Those are coming up soon.
Up soon. Ben Browder chose to play the neural clone as if the events of Season 3 had not occurred and he had been suspended in time when the neurochip was removed from Crichton's head at the end of Season 2.
All right, y'all can just take the thing that I said earlier and turn it into trivia. That's fine. Because I was saying that this is the Ben. That's yeah.
That one's odd to me because like Ben Browder, it feels like a writing choice, but whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. This is the only episode in the entire series that is centered around Scorpius. Oh, man.
Bummer.
Jewel and Chiana have an exchange in which Jewel notes, "Didn't you come on board as a guest?" Indeed, for her first few episodes, Gigi Edgley was credited as a guest star, much as Tammy McIntosh, Jewel, is in this episode, even though she has become a regular.
That's some good meta humor, if I've ever seen it.
Mm-hmm.
That was all of the Farscape Encyclopedia Project background info. I'm going to real briefly find a couple of pieces from the Illustrated Companion that I thought were worth bringing up. First paragraph, on the Ideas pinboard, the writer's room at Homebush Bay, are a number of file cards. Some simply bear one word, others might have a sentence or a description of an image. Some of them have initials at the bottom indicating whose idea it was. Since the start of the second season, one has sat there bearing the initials RM, A Day in the Life of Scorpius. So Ricky Manning, I love the name Ricky, finally got to do the episode that he's always wanted to do. There's some other stuff in here about how Wayne Pigram worked extensively with Evan Sheaves, that's Teenage Scorpius, to ensure a continuity of Scorpius's mannerisms. We had to believe that this boy was the young Scorpius, Watson points out. We revoiced the boy with Wayne doing a younger version of himself, but it's a fantastic performance from Evan.
That's so cool. That's such a cool thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you're a little kid and Wayne Pigram is like, all right, let's practice this. I don't have anything more detailed than that. I just think that would be such a neat experience.
Right, to get to play the younger version of an established character, and you're like being mentored by them on how they work. Mm-hmm. It's very cool. Watson deliberately gave Incubator an unusual visual style. The challenge was to do an episode which didn't feature the usual characters as much, and make it visually interesting, he explains. I didn't dolly or put the camera on wheels once. The camera is either fixed or it pans. I wanted it to be much more static and create a sense of snapshots from Scorpius's past.
I did get that feeling.
Yeah, the camera is very deliberately placed in those shots. Kind of like surveillance cameras.
Yeah.
Ian Watson.
That's fascinating.
And then finally, the rape that led to Scorpius' inception caused concern. There was a lot of discussion about that scene. We were concerned about the level of implied violence. I told Sam Healey that I wanted emotional intensity of what was happening to read on her face, and that when the scene was finished, I wanted every male in the room to feel guilty. Good ass line. Magellan, I think that has been our coverage of Incubator. Do you want to pull some help from the ether and talk about Meltdown?
I would love to do that.
Awesome. Well, let's crack open a Moyabag, and then we'll be right back to discuss Meltdown. Hello, ScapeChatz listeners. This is Alan, and it's time for the Moyabag for episode 29 of ScapeChatz. I'm back this week, folks. I let Magellan take over the Moyabag and the editing last week, so if you thought it sounded like hot trash, well, you're wrong, but also not my problem. If you're new, first of all, why are you starting at episode 29? But hey, to each their own. The Moyabag is a segment where one of us, or both of us, reads the feedback that we received on last week's episode. First up, we usually start with Twitter, and this week we don't have a lot of tweets because our usual memo maiden, leader, awesome person was very busy and not feeling super well this week, so they didn't have time to write a memo, but they did say that Jewel has this sort of Slave Leia type outfit now, and they don't know if they like it. And they liked our comment about not putting ourselves on the same level as our O'Bannon overlord and how they slip and sometimes call him Rock, which is funny. And that was it for them. We're hoping for another memo next week, of course. And we have a new listener who replied to us on Twitter this week, just a few hours ago as of me reading these. @NoClassTwit says, these are 2 tweets in a row, 2 hours apart. On episode 15, gonna catch up soon. Enjoying the show, hope the puppets become more and more real to you as the show goes on. And then, just heard episode 15, if you don't cry during at least 3 different points in the way we weren't, you may not have a human heart. There's plenty of crying, so I'm pretty sure that I'm human. We got one email this week, which I'm actually going to read all of, because it's pretty tight, and it's pretty tight in both definitions of the word. It's from Dax Static.
I put a shot to your system.
Who is a frequent emailer and wonderful human being. And they say, greetings, Alan and Magellan. I'm going to try to keep this week's email short as I tend to ramble on a bit, I've noticed. First of all, rambling is not a problem. We're going to read all of it, at least to ourselves. We may not read all of it on the Moyabag. This one's short enough that I'd love to read all of it for everyone. These are actually regarding the episodes that we discussed this week, Incubator and Meltdown. So spoilers for Meltdown if you were going to save that discussion until you watched it, or you know what I meant. Incubator is one of my favorite episodes of Farscape ever, right along with Eat Me. I mentioned previously how I was not a fan of the long-lost relative trope that they're using with Aaron's mom. Well, the opposite is true for this trope, the villain backstory. I'm just a sucker for these kinds of episodes or issues. The real secret to making them work is having a lot of experience with the villain in question to put it all in perspective. If we had been given this story back, say, after only seeing Scorpius for 2-3 episodes, it wouldn't have had the same impact. Which I agree, and I think that's very prescient, and it's a good point. Then we have Meltdown. While I can say it was an okay episode, quite honestly, I had completely forgotten it from my first time watching. The only thing after seeing it a second time that sticks out to me now is the comedic jazz music, lusty John and Aaron scenes. Yes. And then this is regarding their comment from last week, I think. I want to clarify my earlier statement about Cray/Lani Tupu. I wasn't criticizing Tupu's acting as bad. I was trying to say that I thought he was intentionally trying to make Crace seem like an ass as a character in order to get us, the audience, to question Crace's authenticity as a good guy. And I think he succeeded, at least from my POV. Thanks for the offer to make a bumper for me. The only kind of idea I can come up with is some kind of staticky noise based on the static theme I use on my online handles. I think it's pretty obvious that Static ain't a real last name, even though Dax is my real first name. Is that okay for us? That's okay for us to say that then. And I was born way before that Star Trek chick. I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to self-promote like that. I always get a Wayne's World, I'm not worthy feeling if I ever try to talk to someone else into talking about me, if that makes sense. Anything you guys come up with, if you choose to, I'm sure to love. So I'm hoping you enjoyed the bumper that we gave you this week, Dax. Hope you guys enjoy the episodes. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts, as always. Thank you, Dax, for the email. Emails, as always, can be sent to ScapeChatz@gmail.com. Lastly, we have the Reddit thread, which we do every week, over at reddit.com/r/Farscape. We have a long thread this week from Blue Blaze Spear, who is great, and Leo Chris, who responds, and they're both awesome. Although I'm not going to read all of this because there's some Season 4 spoilers in here, so if you've seen the whole show and you want to hear people talk about Season 4, go ahead and read the Episode 28 thread on Reddit, but I'm not going to read any of that. I know that they started by talking about Zahn being tricky as a character because she was being put on Moya fully formed, while everyone else still had growing to do, and in a way, Rigel is the same way. I think they were smart not to replace her with a new wise counselor that stepped into the old role. I don't think Moya's crew would have accepted that, and I don't think we would have as viewers. I tend to stay meh about Jewel throughout the series, but I appreciate that they tried to do something different with the character, almost to the point of giving us an anti-Zahn who still filled a lot of those plot holes. Or filled a lot of those jobs, rather. I'm glad that they do give her something to do. To which Leo Chris says, indeed, Zahn had a maturity to her that is hardly found at similar levels among the rest of the crew. Jewel is able to step in her shoes for certain things, but falls short for others. No one, for example, is able to connect with Stark in the same way. Not that anyone would be expecting Jewel to, however. And then they talk about Season 4 stuff a lot. Y'all are crazy. Not going to read any of that. A top comment on the thread, though, is actually from Leo Chris, and it says, glad to hear you're enjoying Jewel's characterization. I definitely think the show managed to fill in the void left by Zahn without making her a carbon copy, and it's fascinating to see another person's innocence, for lack of a better term, get corrupted aboard Moya, just like John's was in Season 1. In many ways, she's the new John and the new Zan, except not quite. I feel like I've written a similar analysis of her in a previous episode's comment, but it's nice to see her grow from fish out of water to actually useful crew member. I feel like we haven't seen enough Jewel to fully fall in love with her or determine what we think about her yet, but I'm okay with her. She's cool. I'd party with Jewel. And then there's a long comment from Blue Bay Spear about the Scarens and the Scorpius story and Gigi Edgley portraying the energy rider inside of her and keeping it from sounding like parody. And here's a good comment. The reason it makes the most sense for me to have John be the character that gets split is because he's the only character who has two motivations, and sadly, they're motivations that are mostly at odds. With the two Johns, we get to see him chase both goals. On the one hand, he wants to run off with Aaron and live happily ever after, which is a goal he gets to chase on Talon. But on the other hand, he wants to find a way to get back home to Earth, which will likely be through cracking his wormhole knowledge, which is a goal that he gets to chase aboard Moya. I don't need a stereotypical white guy on each ship, but I do need characters that can pursue distinct things without straying from the character's core. No matter how good or bad an episode of Farscape is, they always have quotable quotes, and I enjoy hearing you guys revel in them. It's funny that you mentioned Stark's grief, because next week Meltdown is all about exploring his grief. His characterization never wins me over completely, but I lay on the John and Aaron stuff really thickly, and the Zalak's son stuff being kind of weird, because it's upending a lot of tropes. And finally, on a sadder note, we're left to contemplate the possibility that Aaron could have ended up like Zalak's, in that she is granted an opportunity to redeem herself in High Command's eyes by killing Talon, Aaron's dad. If instead of being retired, Aaron was given an option to redeem herself by killing Moya's crew, things might have turned out differently. And Mr. J Handle is a new comment. The Scrubs Screwing All Day episode is the best Screwing All Day episode ever, IMHO. I've seen that episode. It's very good. I haven't seen all of Scrubs, but I've watched a lot of it. And that one is from Season 1. I believe you're correct. People can look that one up. It's the one where, like, JD and the blonde lady. It's been like 8 years since I watched Scrubs seriously. We rewatched it recently for a failed podcast that never came to fruition, but it wasn't a Scrubs podcast. It was like a TV thing. Or no, it was for a blog. Whatever. That doesn't matter right now. What does matter is that the last thing in these Reddit comments that I want to talk about is the fact that I've brought up Mass Effect multiple times, the Mass Effect video game series on this show. It's one of my favorite game series of all time, and multiple people in the thread said that they would love a Mass Effect bonus episode. I would love to do that, because I think there's enough interesting comparisons between Farscape and the Mass Effect series, and it would be cool to talk about how the tropes and themes of the show led to certain moments that are in the games. Because there are a lot of things that kind of carried over, mainly stuff like the idea of ancients and just the roles of different people on the crew, and I'm pretty sure Claudia Black voices a character in the Mass Effect series, but she's also in every video game, so that's not necessarily a direct line. But anyways, I would love to do that. We have a lot of ideas for what we want to do with bonus episodes after the main show is done, and so we're going to put that one in the tank, and I'll start workshopping it. So thank you all for recommending I do it, because I love doing shows for you. Apologies for this one going a little long. I really wanted to get to all of your feedback. Once again, those Reddit threads can be found at reddit.com/r/Farscape. Next up, we have our guest episode discussion of Meltdown, which I had a ton of fun recording. We really enjoyed doing that. We'd love to have more guests on. If you would like to be a guest on ScapeChatz and you'd like to talk with us about an episode that we haven't watched yet, feel free to send us a clip of your voice with your best microphone to scapechats@gmail.com. I need a minute to 2 minutes, whatever. It's all nice to have. And excuse the audio weirdness with this guest segment. Occasionally there was some weird lineup with the syncing of the tracks, but it is mostly as good as it is going to sound. Thank you for listening to the Moyabag, and enjoy the discussion of Meltdown. Cool. Next up, we're going to be discussing Season 3, Episode 12, Meltdown, which was directed by Ian Barry, written by Pinky Beecroft, aka Matt Ford, and it premiered July 14th, 2001. For this episode, we're joined by the #1 Farscape fan and cool human being... Hi, Omens, what's up?
Not much, actually. This morning was actually really good, and now I'm here, so nice.
Excellent. And you watched Meltdown, and you chose to be our guest on this episode, and we appreciate that. I guess I want to start by asking you, why Meltdown?
Well, it's lovely. Like, I always feel like people, like, don't appreciate this episode enough. And I love it. It's not so much, like, it's not, like, particularly special, but it's, like, one of my favorite, like, one-off Farscapes, and it's like pretty much the only comedy episode of season 3. So yeah,
it is interesting how it fits into that part of the season, and how it's like weirdly funny, and for a Talon episode is like very out there, because so far we've seen a lot of the Talon episodes be more focused on like character development and like serious stuff.
Yeah, I retract what I said last time about there being the alternation being between like Talon is these serious plot episodes, and then Moya are like the crazy goofy buddy ones. That's not true now.
Not anymore.
No way.
Okay, so Magellan, what did you think of the episode, I guess?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I think I watched this episode under the perfect circumstances, because we're recording in the morning, and I was going to watch it last night, and then I fell asleep before I could, and then it was like, okay, maybe I'll watch it in the morning. But I woke up at 4 a.m. and I couldn't fall back asleep, so I watched this episode at 4 a.m. and then fell asleep right after. It was like a dream that I had.
Good. I think I watched this episode under perfect circumstances as well, because I just watched it in 2 parts, one part with a friend, one part previously, and it was very much like the way I originally watched it, with me just being like laid up. I was ill the past couple of days, so it's a good sick episode is what I'm saying. Yeah,
for sure, because it has that kind of frenetic energy to it that I think is really, really great. Yeah, and I loved that we got some sweet Stark action. I think that was my favorite part, is that he was doing a lot in this episode, and he hasn't been doing a lot for a while. And he was doing He had this central plot kind of to himself, but in a way that only Stark could have a plot. So I really appreciated that aspect of it.
Yes, exactly.
And the way that his plot like is not only interesting and provides character development, but reminds us that there's like a tragedy to his arc. And like Owen's mentioned in previous memos, the classical nature of his relationship with Zan coming back and reminding him that like he is so invested in this story because he's lacking that like physical companionship with another person now.
Mm-hmm.
And so for this Sierge to come onto the ship and be like, hey, you're the only person who can see me and touch me. It's like this light goes off in his head like, oh shit, I have a reason to exist now. Like, of course he's going to do everything he can to be around her and be with her because he just lost the only person that he felt intimate with.
Yes, and as we will get to later, when Sierge, I'm going to spoil it, when Sierge goes, he latches on to someone else. Right,
exactly. I mean, we can jump around. We're going to kind of like go fairly linearly, but people who are listening to this have watched the episode, hopefully, so you don't have to worry about spoiling the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
It starts, though, with a really weird cold open, which we were talking about, where it's the scene from when they were on the jungle planet with Zalak's son, except now we see it from Krace's perspective, and he shoots, as we expected, several bullets into a tree and not Zalak's herself, and then says that he wants to keep her alive so that he can get it reinstated as a peacekeeper. And you're like, oh, this is a weird time to reintroduce that, but sure, that made sense that's true. And then he turns to the camera in a very, like, you know, Parks and Rec or like The Office kind of way, and he's like, is that what you think happened, Crichton? Is that what you really think? Mm-hmm. And it's revealed to all be, I think it's like Crichton's dream or something.
I don't think it's Crichton's dream. I think what it's revealed to be is he's talking to Krace, and then it's like an actual conversation.
About you're right.
Like...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is, it's a clever way to make us remember, like, hey, that stuff isn't taken care of yet. And you need to remember that maybe she's not dead. She's not. No one's, they're not fooling her.
Well, like maybe. That's all I'm saying. Like, maybe. Because she comes back at a...
Well, there you go. Cool, good time.
At a really weird time.
Right.
Like, at a really strange time. And,
I get that.
But, like, also, like, it's just man, like, it's weird.
I think that's a given with this show.
I would be surprised if it wasn't weird, because everything on this show is somewhat weird.
Yeah,
especially...
this is like, I don't want to spoil it, but basically, I talk about the Ophelia scene a lot with you guys now that it's coming up.
Yeah.
And there's
that hasn't
a
come up
whole
yet.
bunch of stuff in that episode that is like super crazy, but oh my god, it's so depressing.
And yeah, that's the show. But so what we realize very quickly in this episode, though, is that Talon is being drawn towards a sun, which is weird, but we learn that like the sun has radiation stuff, so we are immediately set up with the stakes of a typical Farscape episode.
Also,
which is that
Odyssey reference.
How so? Oh, like with the sirens and all of that. Yeah. I mean, they straight up call something there like the siren like radiation or something.
Yeah.
I that was the whole sequence where they're being drawn into the sun was some really fantastic dramatic tension. I think you, Alan, especially harp on fake dramatic tension a lot.
Yep.
And I didn't realistically think they were going to die right then, but it made me completely forget that I really wanted to know what happened with Zalak's son for the next like 30 minutes. And then towards the end of the episode, I was like, wait a minute, hold on. Whatever happened to that part?
That was a whole thing that we saw earlier.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry, you go. I don't mean to interrupt.
No, all I was gonna say was, it's in this case and in most of the good cases with drama on this show, it isn't a question of will they survive. It's like, how are they going to survive?
Right.
Because that's where the tension gets interesting. Of course, they're not gonna die and fall into the sun. That'd be silly.
Mm-hmm. And I think the whole point of having that sequence and then having that like big thing just immediately, like bam, here's your plot, is like number one, classic Farscape, and number two, they want to make you forget that sequence. They want to leave you satisfied enough,
right?
So that you just don't question, oh, what happened to Zalax?
Right.
Mhm.
And then you're going to see it again later and be like, oh, shit, I remember Meltdown when they talked about that real briefly.
Yeah.
But there was a line, right, it's the end of the cold open, where they're all freaking out, and then John's like, hey, guys, we are flying into the sun. And I just smiled, and I'm like, I love this show. This is a show where we can fly into the sun, and that's the way the episode starts. Like, that's so perfect.
Yes.
It's so far. Like, we talk about the concept of, like, things being very Farscape, and it's important that we kind of, like, really drill down on what that means. And it's that line. It's just like, oh, whoopsie, a typical day on Talon, and like, uh-oh, now we're flying into the sun, and we're all going to burn alive. And everyone's radiated and wanting to have sex. Or in the case of Rigel, real hungry.
Or hormoned and wanting to have sex. Or whatever.
Right. I thought it was good that they didn't make it so everybody was super horny. Because the radiation of the sun, basically, they describe it as like it makes your most basic impulses come out and they become like your primary desire.
Was that the radiation or was it the mist that Talon was extruding?
It was the mist.
It was the mist, but what? So why was Talon extruding mist then?
Because he was like so freaked out by being burned alive. It's the Leviathan version of adrenaline, and it got really super acidic and started corroding the like pipes.
Mm.
It started corroding his blood vessels.
Right. That's why John and Aaron had to spend the entire episode like fixing things and then being like, "Wait, but I want to smooch you."
Right.
Lots of that.
That was perfect.
I thought because the mist, the way that it did that and how they explain the mechanics of it was another good like Farscape mechanics situation. Because for Aaron and John, because their physiology is like pretty similar, they both ended up really wanting to bone. So, but my question is then like, what did the mist do for Crace? Because Crace is also sebation.
It made him super trigger happy.
Yeah.
Oh,
which is odd. Like, I actually thought that John and Crace were getting along in a much more civil manner than usual this episode.
Yeah.
And Crace, I guess, yeah, he's more trigger happy, but also he's always kind of yelly and shouty.
But it didn't seem that different for him. It's like he's mad enough that he'll shoot someone.
I think what they intended was that he was more violent.
That makes sense. There are moments later in the episode where he plays that up better, but Lonnie Tube was one of the most like subtle actors on this show. So
I don't know. I think he's both.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got two things to explain.
Yes.
One is like a headcanon, and the other is like based like in production stuff.
Sure. Okay. Uh-huh.
So, my headcanon is that Crace was also horny, but since he did not have a partner,
he's frustrated.
Like, he was like because he's only really acting violent towards like Aaron and people who aren't like John.
So he's like impotently horny.
He's impotently horny, and I just thought of that now. And a production thing, and the reason why Lonnie Super sort of plays up the violence at the end of the episode is Matt Ford did not give them the script for this episode until like the last day.
What?
It was they did not know what they were doing on this episode, and it turned out fantastic. This is like Beware of Dog Part 2 production wise, and it turns out fantastic.
I like
Is there
that.
Was that because they didn't have the script done, or was it a purposeful thing?
They didn't have the script done. I think. I'm not sure. But Farscape is known for being really disorganized, so they just kind of went with it.
Sure.
It's another thing I love about it, though, is that it's always like, I think I was talking in one of the Reddit threads or something with people about how this show has like melded its production with the story. And stuff has happened because of production circumstances. Like, in a big way, Zahn died because Virginia Hay couldn't keep wearing the makeup. That's, like, at least in part because of that. Like, you don't often see shows, or you don't at least know that shows are changing based on the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. But with Farscape, it's very front and center. Like, this episode is weird because we didn't have the time, or the makeup department had to do certain things. Like, someone was suggesting, I think, in an email or something, that the reason they split up Moya and Talon was because everyone on Moya has heavy makeup, and everyone on Talon doesn't. So they would like do the makeup day.
Huh.
That was a theory, but it's like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, and it's exactly true. Because they only have like Rigel's the only puppet on Talon also.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
Stark just has his mask.
Right.
And Aaron will occasionally have her ears pinned back, but that's it.
Is that a thing?
That's like you'll see it like sometimes when she has it in her ponytail. Like, her ears are...
I thought she just had crazy ears.
Because I love Claudia Black's ears. I love
How can you not love Claudia Black? She's great.
I know.
Talon has really cool DRDs was the next note that I had here.
Yes.
This was mentioned previously, but like Talon has different DRDs. They're kind of more oblong and red, and they kind of look more imposing. It's kind of like when you get like the default color scheme in like a racing game on your car, and then like when you're 13 and a boy, you like do the red flames pattern. Like that's what Talon's DRDs are. He's like,
Okay.
these look sweet.
Okay, I have a note down here.
Yep.
Speaking of the art department, like, there's so much dry ice in this episode.
Yeah, it's all the mist.
It's amazing. But I just put down here, like, go dry ice. Because it's such a Farscape staple.
It's doing a lot of work, yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It is the reason that this episode has a really weird look to it. Is it's all like
Yes.
hazy and covered in mist constantly. But we very quickly established the radiation stuff or the mist stuff, and did everyone else notice that the music that plays when John and Aaron are getting horny?
Yeah,
is like
okay. It was just the saltiest, just like the gooeyest sax.
Yeah,
It was like, what are you doing?
Basically, it's the same one as was playing when when Aaron was playing, or Claudia, whatever, in Out of Their Minds, when, what's your face?
Oh, when he was looking
Claudia
at her
as
body?
John was playing with Aaron's boobs.
Oh shit! It is that music.
It's the same music.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I call it
That's
the
funny.
I call it Sexy Bongo and Saxophone Land. Which I was gonna, like, as I was listening to that, I actually thought of something. Claudia Black actually did like a really weird animated movie in 2012 where she played a saxophone player, like a gay saxophone player.
Wait, what? Okay, that's amazing. That sounds dope. Sorry.
It's a gay dystopian rock musical, and it has her and Tara Strong.
What?
And
Oh my god.
and they're playing like in their love interests, and I want to watch it, but it's the animation is so weird.
Strange
called?
Frame, Love and Sax.
Yes.
Love and Sax!
Sax.
Oh, we need to watch this. This might be a bonus episode, folks.
Okay.
When you were describing that, I thought you were going to say that she plays a saxophone, and because you said it's animated, so I'm like, oh, it's a cool music comedy. All right.
She once played a unicorn in a nut commercial.
That's a great thing to have on a resume. I played a unicorn in a nut commercial. What did you do with your life?
Anyways, yeah, so it's this thick saxophone.
Yeah.
And the thing I loved about all of their whatever desire to have sex, I'm not going to try to make it funny. That's what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that those uniforms are not sexy. There's
Nope.
just some like she
everyone
like
loves
hops
them.
on him, right? And he's like rubbing his hands over the leather, and I can just imagine it's like squeaking in a weird way.
Yes. If you watch the
You
director's
can't really
cuts, you
see
can hear it
anything.
squeaking. And director's
Yeah.
cuts are the worst for that reason.
Because of the squeaking.
Yes, because of the squeaking.
It's her because the thing is, like, we praise the show for having like very functional clothing a lot of times, not always, but like sometimes, and then when they're like, no, now we need to be horny, and you're like, no, but like he's wearing a fucking vest and like jeans, and she's in like the thickest leather coat, like, or whatever leather like get up, and they're not taking them off because it's cable and we can't actually get like super naked and awesome. It's weird. It was like a softcore sex scene.
Yes, exactly. That was the point, actually. They call the fandom will occasionally call it the closest thing to porn sci-fi will allow.
Yeah.
But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, the part where Aaron just like drops something and bends over and John smacks her ass. Just like it was just like, okay, now I'm into this. This is cool.
This is great.
But
This is
even
great.
that, it was like the laziest bend that you
Yes.
could possibly do. Like, there's still something about it. Yeah.
Well,
Which is
so
funny.
There's actually sorry, you go, Alan. I'll go after.
we might have been saying the same thing. There's like production notes about how they are such good friends that they were just like, and I'm gonna read it at the end, but like they did multiple takes of that kind of stuff just because it was fun. And they're like, oh, we did like practice kissing, and then eventually the people have to be like, all right, stop kissing, we need to do the next scene. And they're like, no, we're having fun.
This carried on throughout like the entire series. The crew would just go take coffee breaks while they were making out.
Yeah, no, we're having fun.
You read that later, but and actually, like every time Ben was in leather, like even on when they were like on Moya or whatever, like all the girls would like make him bend over and like drop things purposefully so they could smack his ass.
John probably has a nice butt. I don't know.
I don't know, but they say his butt looks good in leather, and
Oh yeah,
I'm not quite
leather
sure.
helps.
Yes, leather helps.
Leather helps.
We're then introduced to the A plot, which is about a tale of two forlorn lovers named McQuillis and
Lava
Sierra.
Boy and Shark Girl.
Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Nope, you're right. Lava Boy and Shark Girl. You're right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's our favorite.
They even called
movie
him
to
Lava
reference.
Boy.
Yes, and I knew you were gonna make that joke
Yes.
when I heard it.
We are creatures of comfort, if anything.
But, like,
I loved McQuillis. He's such a ridiculous little rock man. He was like
yes.
he was like a Tekken character or something.
Yes.
Yes. For me, I just wrote down McQuillis, my dude. Also, the way he sneaks into frame with Erin and she's making that sexy face and he's talking about how he can't control the star creeps me out. Like, do you remember that shot when he's like really close to her in frame?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
And like I like love McQuillis as a character, but like as a person, talk about like abusive dick.
Yeah, a little bit. So what's his whole deal with Sierra? This is kind of like the main plot question that confused me a little bit. It was like, what? Because someone's betraying someone. Someone's like lying.
Yeah. Basically, supposedly, according to Sierra,
Yeah.
she died on her Leviathan as it was going into the star, and he found her so beautiful that he kept her alive and in limbo with him. So he basically kidnapped her.
Oh, gross.
I know.
And so she was excited to finally get to like be
Free, yeah.
corporeal and then get to be freed after that. Interesting.
Yes.
So something I was confused by was so he comes to them at the beginning and says that they should try to escape, right? But he's also trying to kill them. But what's the deal with him doing that?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a weird moment because he does seem genuinely trying to get them to escape, and then Crace immediately thinks that he's the one that's doing it, and he is. And then later on, when he's trying to get them to leave, it makes sense because Stark is freeing Sears and he doesn't want him to do that. But I was shaky on his motivation.
I think he wanted them to leave because he knew that Stark could get her out. And he's like, no, you all need to leave because you're going to get my cool girlfriend out, and I don't want you to do that.
I guess I mean, that's the only plausible thing I can think of, but there was no scene where we saw Muquillis even interacting with or seeing Stark.
Right.
So, I don't know.
He's like very firmly on the other side of the ship where he's talking to like Aaron, John, and Crace and not talking to Stark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think he knew Sierra would try to kalish, as she calls it.
What's Kalish? Is
like teleport.
Oh, okay.
Do her fancy Dolvarian thing.
Yes. Yeah. I just we were talking about McQuillis' like weird design. I kept thinking of like the Elder Scrolls Oblivion because he looked like one of those. Even the way he comes in, like the like orange, the like fire portal that he comes through.
Thing?
I'm like, this is Oblivion. You came out of Oblivion. That game's coming out like 6 years later, but damn, you're just doing that. I like rock people, and apparently his makeup thing was there's a really really good piece of trivia about his makeup. And his weird nails. He's got like weird fingernails.
He kind of looked like the only cool looking miniature that your dungeon master has. And so he's the villain in everything. It's like, okay, this time he's a dragon, but he's still using like this cool looking lava man.
And this time he's a like sassy businessman, but he's still the lava man. He's just like a lava businessman.
Yeah, for me, at least, I always see parallels. Like, if you combine McQuillis and Zan, you kind of get Madame Vostra from, like, season 6 of Doctor Who. I don't know what happened to her. But, yeah. She's very green and, like, angular. Like that.
Oh, I'm looking at pictures. Yeah, she's cool. Should I watch... I don't want to ask if I should watch Doctor Who. Don't put that fandom in my mentions.
Just don't. Like, New Who. Like, watch, like, the first 4 seasons. And then just ignore everything else.
Right. That's what I hear. I didn't think about it until now, the fact that Talon doesn't have a pilot. And once they pointed it out, I was like, huh, that actually makes a lot of sense, because I feel like Pilot being on, I mean, maybe we mentioned this before, but like Pilot or a pilot being on Talon would solve a lot of their conflict, because he would just be like, no, everyone shut up, we're going this way. Because a lot of their conflict is about like controlling Talon, and if Talon had a pilot, then it'd be like, no, we're not, okay, it's controlled, situation taken care of.
Right, which is funny because the reason that he was designed this way was to remove pilots as an intermediary between captains and the ship.
Right, it's supposed to be so that he will be more obedient of Krace or whoever the
dude piloting him is.
Right. Formerly Aaron and Krace, but now only Krace. I just wrote here, I really wanted a gif of that, like, the McQuillis person when he warps in the first time, and I kind of want it to be like walking to the club like this, and then it's just like a fire portal into whoosh. So someone, I don't want to search Farscape gifs though, because I've learned that it's a lot of spoilers.
I've got a friend that can make you that gif.
I've got a gif friend.
So I will ask Steph,
okay,
and you will get your gif.
Thank you, I appreciate
have to
that.
go to a back alley.
Yep.
And they'll have a leather jacket full of gifts.
Sweet gifts. Because it's like, we aren't done with the show yet, and we're the newcomers podcast, so like, if I look up gifts, I'm gonna spoil something huge.
You're gonna spoil, actually, if you look up gifs, you're gonna spoil the last scene of the entire show.
Yeah, you were telling me on like Twitter, the gifts there are just like, yeah.
Just don't.
So we haven't talked about Rigel yet. Real briefly, I want to bring up the fact that Rigel is amazing in this episode.
Yes.
And this really, we were talking earlier about how there was a thread on the subreddit, the Farscape subreddit, that was like, why do they keep Rigel on the ship? It's a funny question, because it's like, well, if they had the capability to just be like, hey, you're actively harming us, then the first person they would kick off is Pilot, of course. But he is on the ship because they don't have any reason, they don't have any way of kicking people off.
You mean Rigel instead of Pilot?
Oh, sorry, I get them mixed up all the time.
I know.
I get the voice actors. It's great. I'm really bad. I'm talking about Rigel, the cute chubby boy. He's wonderful. His like thing that he gets affected by the gas is that he's super hungry. And I noticed a cute thing this episode, which is that the reason that all of Rigel's food that he eats is cube or rectangle based is so that the puppet can hold it.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because I was like, wait, if he's the joke is supposed to be like he's eating a huge feast, but all he's eating is like crackers and like biscuits. Like, I get it, space food is weird, but also I think it's so that the puppet can eat the food.
Yes, that's probably right.
Because if you tried to put like a lamb leg in Rigel's hand, then it would just slip out and be really funny, but that wouldn't work.
I have something I have something about the food cubes. Like, in real life, they're like this like tamarind candy thing or whatever. Ooh. They're like something like really weird and Australian. And
sure.
And the cast would get so excited when they were allowed to eat them because they were really good.
Oh, that was like actual food?
That was like actual food. They were like tamarind candy or whatever.
Huh. I'm into that. But like, imagine Rigel. I almost did it again. Imagine Rigel eating a pizza. Just savor that image.
I love it.
I am a domina. Oh. Just can't fit.
They'd have to like ram it into his face.
Yeah.
I wanted to say something, but I'm not gonna. Because you guys
Is
have
it
to
about?
Wait. It's about Rigel and food, and you guys have to wait for it because
God.
I'm not gonna. I can't. It's just too good.
Yeah. So that was the thing I noticed, and then. They like Aaron and John's whole thing is like, oh, we got to fix this thing. Now I got to fix this thing. And then there's that beautiful moment of relief where they're like, we fixed everything. We're going to go now. We finally get to do the thing we wanted to do, which is like have real sex. And then they still don't. I'm like, damn it.
Bad Frel.
Yep. Not the good Frel, the bad Frel.
Yeah, bad Frel.
Yes.
What was I going to say? Okay, there was something about John and Aaron and consent that I kind of wanted to bring up and discuss. I noticed this when one of my friends on Tumblr really brought it up, and you never really, like, there's no explicit, like, verbal consent with them, ever, really. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it's very much non-verbal, but you always know both of them are, like, ready, and there's no, like, coercion or anything. And consent becomes a pretty big issue maybe later, just with like one scene, with someone else.
It is I mean, that's like a TV thing. Is a lot of times they don't like care to film or like bring up the idea of consent with sexual stuff because it's more like TV friendly to just be like, and now we're horny and now we want to have sex, like smoochy, which honestly gives people like a bad impression of how to initiate that kind of thing.
Right.
But
because then a lot of people's encounter with the idea of consent is like, oh well, what about like the mood, or
right, it doesn't work like that in real life.
But Farscape actually does it pretty well, because even like before they kiss, you can sort of like tell they're like figuring each other out. Like, are you actually doing this? Right,
there's a progression of mood for them for sure.
Yeah.
Speaking of progression, what did y'all think of Stark turning into pilot?
Stark, dude.
Oh, Stark. Misguided from the start.
As soon as Stark said, "I have a plan,"
you're like, "Uh-oh."
What? Because I've never seen Stark have maybe once, but it's like, what does a Stark plan look like?
Yes, exactly. And like, the first time I watched it, I remember I was like totally not expecting that, and it happened, and I'm just like, dude. Really?
Well, because you don't even like, it isn't even visually set up, because he just goes, listen to me, I won't let that happen, I have a plan. And he's like, yeah, and he just goes to this like tiny little room that looks like it has a weird hot tub in it, and he like puts a foot inside and goes, whoops, I'm like, whoopsie, I fell in, now I'm the pilot. And it's like this awful, like terrifying body horror scene where he loses his legs and they get turned into this like, it's like something out of System Shock, if people have played that game, but like mixing humans with technology. It's so weird and scary, and like it looks like he had control for 1 second and then immediately lost it, and you're like, damn it, Stark, you always do this.
I actually don't like, I don't view that scene that way, probably because I don't really view it at all. Like whenever that scene comes around, I like will like either like I don't know, it just happens
skip for you.
that I'm just not looking at the screen.
Yeah.
And oh wow, Stark's pilot now. Great.
It's gross. And it doesn't go well. He, for a second, is like, oh, this is fun. I can, like, make us leave. Yay, I did it. And then Ziyechna's like, no, but now I'm gone. And he's like, shit. Turn around again. Like, he just, if this was a car, like, if Talon was a car, it's just like, go a couple routes forward and then be like, damn, we gotta back up. Damn it, we gotta take the next U-turn back around again.
Oh, you missed it. Yeah.
Oh, you missed the turn. Oh, we gotta go for 20 minutes.
This episode is so weirdly paced. It's bizarre because it like shifts, it changes the stakes partway through in that moment, where it's like, it's not just about escape, and it shifts Stark into this role where now he's an antagonist for everybody else to a certain extent, and you don't know like how okay it is that he's fused to Talon like that, because it looks kind of horrific, but also Stark is always screaming,
right?
So it's like you can't
maybe
gauge.
This is fine.
Yeah, this could be okay. And so there's that middle time where it's kind of like, Stark, what is going on? And he's like, don't worry, I'm doing my thing. And they spend a couple minutes in that limbo until the rest of the episode starts up. But it's just kind of weird fits and starts of action and plot in this episode.
Please, fits and starts.
Yes, exactly. And I'm just thinking of this now. I kind of liken it to the season 6 progression of Buffy.
Hey, ding, 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 ding. Go on.
With Willow's like magic addiction, where it's kind of like, oh no. Like, is it bad for her? Like, yes, it is, but also, is she gonna endanger other people? There is, again, that limbo.
Yeah. Now, this is something I can understand.
Now you're speaking my language. You said Doctor Who earlier, and I'm like, nerds. And then you're like, Buffy season 6, and I'm like, hello? Queer subtext? That probably destroyed the microphone. It was subtext. No, yeah, right, that's queer text. I'm sorry. And, yeah. Buffy's good. Don't get us started.
I know, I won't. Don't get me started either. I have a friend that just finished season 4, and I was like, okay, this is gonna get good. And she just stopped the conversation right there. And I'm like, aw.
Okay, yeah. I was no season 4 is like not great. No, we're not here. We're somewhere else. I really liked the line, the vestigial pilot facility, because I like the idea of there being vestigial rooms.
I love that concept. There was a few moments in this episode where there's kind of comments on like Leviathan physiology being somewhat flawed, because we usually think of it as it's a system that works and sometimes there's problems because of external factors. But in this episode, it's like Talon's adrenaline can melt his insides. That's no good. John had a comment about like how the circuitry was wired weirdly. And then, the whole vestigial pilot den. So there's more of a sense of these beings are not like perfect ships. They have these strange design flaws. Like there's design in them, even if it's design that came about in a not necessarily mechanistic manner.
But you gotta remember that Talon isn't all Leviathan.
True,
He's
that's
part
true.
Leviathan, part Peacekeeper. So maybe some of the Peacekeeper things are interfering with his Leviathan things and causing this crap.
Right, that's a good point.
Is there a comparison to be made between Talon and Scorpius, because they are both products of two different ideologies?
Yes. That, I never made that connection before.
I just did right now. You're welcome. Yeah, that's the line you're referring to where Crace is like, we tried to, but Leviathan biology... Or yeah, you bred out the need for a pilot in Talon. And he says, we tried to, but Leviathan biology is complex. Enough linked genes must have remained for Talon to grow a vestigial pilot facility. John says, like an appendix?
Yes.
Which is, yeah. I would like it more to like a third nipple, which also which makes sense. That's also what for some reason what's it called? The transcript says, but anyways.
The transcript says third nipple?
It says, in quotes, like a third nipple. I think there's commentary in these transcripts, and that might be like writer's commentary.
Maybe that was the original line, and then Ben Browder forgot the line and made something up.
No, because you know how like when people write screenplays, they have to like write the tone also? That might be what they're going for. Or it's just like Matt Ford's being really sassy, so he's writing silly things in the sidebars.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron, I know I pointed out, like we talk about a lot of times the Whedon test, which, just to remind people because it's been a while, is the idea that based on a lot of the older works of Joss Whedon, if you can, you have a good ensemble cast if you can put at least two people in a situation together, any two people, and have interesting and unique and special good conversations and dialogue and action. And I think that happened with Stark and Crace for the first time, because this is the only time so far that we've seen Aaron and John out of commission. And so it's like, well, Stark and Crace are going to be yelling at each other a lot back and forth on the intercoms, because they are the only two people who are active. And that was like an interesting pairing that we've never seen before. Like, what does Stark do with Crace? Oh, it turns out Crace wants control and Stark wants to do stuff and wants to go places.
And I really, really like that pairing. It's something you will again see later, but it's not a common pairing. It's not a common pairing. And it really does only happen when very few other options are available. And
it's just one, it's wonderful because it's coming about because of pretty dire circumstances, and on top of that, these are the two most highly operatic characters in the whole show.
Yes.
So if it's just them, it's like this high drama.
Yes, exactly. And I'm gonna take a moment to like praise Paul Goddard for Stark at the moment. Just that was great. He and Lonnie Tupu sort of hit it off really well. And also Crace and Rigel. That was interesting.
The silliest scene ever. Crace almost lost an ear.
But do you remember Home on Remains? Rigel is really like the Kiva episode that everyone doesn't like.
Oh, yeah.
There's a similar scene with John where they're trying to escape and John just climbs on the throne sled and he's like, and Rigel defends himself by biting John's ear.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
Biting is kind of like a Rigel thing, but you never really think it would happen to Crace. But Crace...
Yeah, I thought he was going to fart. Yeah, I thought he was going to fart at Crace, but he didn't do that.
I mean,
he farted like 8 times.
I mean, he farted at Stark.
That's true.
It's a Stark fart. Crace has nice shoes, y'all. Did y'all notice this? Like,
No.
They don't do a lot of like full body shots on this show. It's a lot of
they
like
don't.
relatively close. But there was a scene right after he was yelling at Stark, and he like walks around on the deck, and I was like, he's got like cool dress shoes, like pointy cool dress shoes. And I want to just meet the person who picks out the shoes for the people on Farscape.
Yes, I want to like have like a meeting with the costume designers and Creature Shop and just be like, okay, so tell me what you know about doing this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah. Like how much of that was intentional?
And it's really cool because the actors were really involved in that sort of thing, like
Right,
designing and stuff. And especially, I like to think, Claudia and the people in makeup sort of know how that works now, and they will bring it up in interviews occasionally.
Yeah. But moving on to the back half of the episode, basically, we learn about the conflict between McQuillis and Sierjna. Stark almost pilots them into the sun, and then doesn't. How do they solve things?
Well, they're going back towards the sun. Stark has that moment where he's realizing that his whole defining characteristic is that he's a failure, pretty much. It's sad, but that's how he's viewing himself. And he kind of recounts all of the things that he's done. Well, first of all, he gets them on the intercoms, and he's like, prepare for peace because we're all going to die.
Yep.
So that, chilling. Then John gets up to the controls, gets on the horn with him after he and Aaron are in the mist, about to just totally do it, and then they're like, "This is dumb. No, we're not supposed to give up. We don't do that. We'll have sex later. Bye." And then John goes up to the bridge. He's talking to Stark, and basically talks him out of it by saying that Aaron is his Zahn. That's nice.
You are killing my Zahn.
Yeah.
Or Zan.
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 Oh, whoops. Yeah. He also says, blow the damn Aurora chair. Crichton has a lot of good lines on that part. He's like, let's talk about the good times. You remember Zahn Stark? Let's talk about Zahn. I tried to help her, but I couldn't.
I didn't even think... I didn't even put this together necessarily, but this is something that I really like about what Stark was talking about, which is that he takes partial responsibility for John getting the neural chip put into his brain.
Right.
Because he was there with John. Which I never even considered that would be a guilt that's weighing on his mind, but I really appreciate that was brought up, because it gives me a lot more insight into Stark and into the fact that he's not just floating through things without thinking, he is internalizing pretty much everything that he has done or not done.
Yeah, and that's actually a very big part of Stark. You will kind of see this later. He internalizes so many different things, and it all just sort of comes flowing out at some point.
I mean, you gotta imagine that's gonna happen eventually, because it's like, he is the person that is the most defined by his past. So he lives so much of his present, like, regretting things and, like, trying to fix things and failing, and then realizing, like, yeah, I've become defined by my failure. And, we talked so many weeks ago about how Stark didn't really have a role yet. And if it's anything, it's the, like when Dargo last week was telling the other Crichton that everything we do sucks and we fail most of the time, like our plans are bad. This crew is a crew of outcasts and people who don't know how to do things right. And that in that way, Stark fits perfectly onto Team Moya and Team Talon, whatever.
Yes.
So that moment is beautiful. Owens, I know you wanted to talk about the, like, Aaron Stark idea?
Because that is important to me in the way that Stark is getting creepy. Like, really creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this one line that I mentioned to you last night. Oh, when they're talking about Zan, you're so much like her. If you say so. And that kind of sums up their relationship, at least until maybe later. Yes, later. And it comes out, man. Stark just breaks.
I can imagine it. Like, they've been hinting at it since that scene where he was in the room with her, and he's like, "You're attractive. A former partner is dead," and she's like, "Get away from me! Don't."
Well, she wasn't even dead yet at that time.
Or he's like, "She's probably gonna die. I need to start thinking about backups." I hope good things happen to Stark. I don't know. And with him and
Oh,
Xander,
I doubt it. He can't.
yeah,
There's no way he has a happy ending.
yeah. If anyone's doomed to go out in an unfortunate, sad way, it's Stark.
I actually
and probably
don't,
Craze.
I actually don't remember how it happens, honestly. I don't remember.
Unfortunately, the wiki has shown us that Stark makes it to Peacekeeper Wars at the very least, so...
But there are some points where he, like, drops out and comes back, and drops out and comes back.
That's pretty cool.
I don't know exactly how or when.
Right.
But he does.
So then everyone's fine. Stark gets out.
Just on the Aaron thing, one line that I loved and I thought was maybe the funniest in the whole episode was when Aaron and John are both on the bridge talking to Stark, and they're like priming the guns to shoot at the sun.
Yep.
And Stark's like, would Zahn have approved of this kind of violence? And then hold on, let me find the exact line. Yeah. No, I have it right here. Aaron says, she's speaking through me now. It's her wish. And then she gives John this look of like, maybe he'll believe that.
Improv, right?
I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, and that's funny, but I kind of see it again as that kind of foreshadowing. It's hilarious, but it's also very, for me.
Yes,
I don't mean to get depressing, but I've seen this episode 5 times.
Yeah. Related to that, though, there's a great John line later where Aaron's yelling at Stark, and then he's like, Talon, it's time. And McQuillis is like, put power down your weapons. I can offer you better terms. And John's like, damn, Smokey, you can't argue with a woman. Which...
And there was this weird zoom past his face into the special effects.
Yeah.
That like 2-second shot. It kind of to me felt like Spy Kids 3D. Like that. That was the vibe that I felt when I looked at that shot.
Yeah.
Like, again, Shark Boy and Lava Girl. That type of thing.
Oh, man.
Like early 2000s children's movie.
So the last thing I want to talk about that happens in this episode is Stark and Crace have a conversation once Stark has like been taken out of pilot, and they talk about how Stark learned things while being inside of Talon about specifically Crace, and he said, and Crace says, Talon is now off limits to you. All functions, all programs, all controls. You know nothing. Talon was not of his right mind. Anything you think you experienced must take that into consideration. Like as he like pulls a knife up to Stark's face.
Yeah.
And then Stark says, I know, even if you slit my throat, I will still know. There is something there.
Yeah.
That's like kind of creepy to me, because we've been spending so much time trying to like establish that Crace is maybe not a good guy necessarily, but he's like working on his own moral compass, and to be like, oh shit, like he is so out for number one that he's willing to like just kill one of them right here and now if it means that he's going to keep this like incredibly dark secret that he knows and that Talon has been keeping internally. It just got the brain turning in my head. Like,
yeah,
what could this possibly be?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's ever any satisfying thing in regards to that. Yeah, the last couple episodes of season 3 are pretty hazy for me. So.
I mean, I could also just assume like it might be as simple as the Zalak Sun stuff. You know, like referring back to the beginning of the episode, like maybe he knows that whole thing, but
maybe.
But then that pretty much brings us to the end of the episode. And then, well, it ends with the 70s porn music again, where John's like, I got a chain of DRDs working on it. Everything will be running in a couple of days. Aaron says, we were lucky. And then he goes, I think that would have brought us together anyways. Crace going to be cutting Stark up for an hour. Rajal's going to take at least that long. He's got 3 stomachs.
Yes, and they just sort of hit the door while holding hands. And it's adorable. And then the return of sexy Bongoland.
Yep. It's my weird porn remix of Donkey Kong Country 3D. That's what that music is. Dixie, please. No, I'm sorry. Never mind.
What was I gonna say?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Remember that? I'm gonna go back for just one big thing.
Oh sure. Go for it.
Aaron's facial expressions in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Like man. And there's this one where Stark or Crace is trying not to get her through Talon or get her through to Talon. and he's like blocking the exit and pointing a gun at her, and she just like laughs, like, the fuck are you doing? And just takes the other exit. And I'm like, yeah, that's my baby.
That's my babe. People don't know already that Omens has a huge crush on Claudia Black. There you go.
Yes. Speaking of which, don't watch Farscape with me in real life, because you know that line that John says in this episode, "Hey baby, how you doing?" I mimic that every time Aaron walks into a scene.
Hey baby, how you doing? Magellan, would you like to read us the background information from the Farscape Encyclopedia
I would
project?
love to do that. Background information. Director Ian Barry stated that when Dave Elsey was creating Moo Quillis's costume, he created, quote, a pair of wonderful gloves, which were knobby and lava-like, with fantastic fingernails that had little LEDs in them, which were like glowing embers. The costume also had lights in the head to simulate gas fires and give off a glowing effect. Do you think he made that before they even made up the character? Like, he was just bored, and he was like, what if we made this guy?
It's like Freddy Krueger, but like cute and fiery.
He is like Freddy Krueger.
Yeah. He's all burned and has like it's the whole nails thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's time.
Let's see. Mark Mitchell, who played Moo Quillis, would fall deeply asleep in the makeup chair each morning while his makeup was being applied.
I have the exact quote about that. Damn it. Well, I'll find it later. I'll read it when we get to my part.
Great.
Yeah.
The scenes in Talon's vestigial pilot's den were shot on the sets of Moya's pilot's den with the pilot puppet removed. And again, just like they did great lighting with the Talip possession of Pilot in whatever that episode was called, the one that we did recently. Losing Time. Thank you. Great. The lighting here was really important in making you not realize that it was the same set that you've always seen. Like, it looked like a completely different pilot den.
Huh. I guess, again, like with the diseased ship and Eat Me, I keep forgetting that they're still using the same Moya set. Weird show.
Mm-hmm. And I think Talon might be a slightly separate set. Like, Talon itself is a separate set. But then, like, no, seriously, the pilot's den is basically just a green screen and the puppet.
Oh, weird.
On Moya, it's a green screen and then Pilot's, like, little puppet stand thing, and then Pilot, and then more green screen. I don't mean to, like, kill the magic for you, but...
No, it's, I mean, TV shows are made by people. It's like, I've learned
that. Cool. Anyway, for the scene where Stark joins Talon, the tendrils going into Stark were actually pulled off of Paul Goddard, and the film was later reversed.
Oh, whoa. There was something weird about the way, like, you can kind of see when film looks reversed.
See. Yeah.
Yeah, and I kind of noticed it there. Right.
Let's see. For the scene where Stark joins... Oh, that's what I just said.
Yep.
Claudia Black joked that the crew had become so accustomed, we said this before, to her making out with Ben Browder during rehearsals that they would go for coffee breaks rather than watch. That's funny.
Can I read the 2 paragraphs about that? This is my favorite part. This is Ben Browder. I'm glad it was Claudia I was doing that episode with, Browder admits. We have a remarkable working relationship in that we're really good friends, and the boundaries of our working relationship are very clear and well drawn. We don't get into that uneasy space that you often get into working with someone that closely. It's proof that we work really well together, that we could do that episode without getting stressed. And then Black agrees. I'm not going to try and do a Claudia Black voice. It was very difficult to shoot, but it was funny because Ben and I spent all our time on set kissing. Normally in rehearsals, we'll mark the point to insert kiss here on the day, and sometimes the crew will ask us in a very perfunctory way to get into kissing positions, which is a good sentence. On this episode, we had to do it in rehearsals, and the crew were standing around going, oh god, they're going to kiss again, let's go make a cup of coffee. Kissing is fun when you're with friends.
Yes. And they had such a lovely relationship. I really hope that... I hope they're still friends, basically, is what I'm saying.
Same.
Okay, let's see. And final piece of background information here. When Crace informs Crichton that the gas leaking from Talon has the potential to affect behavior, Crichton remarks, "We won't go all crackers, will we?" He is referring to the episode Crackers Don't Matter.
Bless you. I heard that... I read that. I wrote down that line when I was listening to it, just to be like, hey, look, that's an obvious reference, but it is relevant. That is the background info from the Farscape Illustrated Companion. There isn't much that we didn't already bring up. There's just like longer versions of what Magellan just told everyone. Dave Elsey was particularly impressed with Mark Mitchell as McQuillis. He was one of the most amazing guys we ever had in the makeup seat, the creature shop supervisor recalls. He would sit in the chair and say, "Good morning," and then fall asleep instantly and not wake up until we finished the makeup. Then he'd go off, do his acting, come back, and fall asleep to the point of snoring while we took the makeup off. So he's just having fun.
Yeah.
I really like that. But that is it for Meltdown. Magellan, I think now that we have a third passenger on board this week, we should bring extra snacks on our way to Planet Netflix.
Oh, man.
Segues are hard.
We brought so many Triscuits. Okay, here we go. Alan, I got a few things that I want to say to you.
Are you okay? Is everything good?
One of them is that next week, we're doing 2 episodes and a third episode.
You might even say we're doing 3 episodes.
That's what you might say. The other things I want to say to you are the summaries for those episodes. So don't worry, you're out of the woods.
Yay.
Season 3, Episode 13, Scratch and Sniff. The crew are on a pleasure planet for some rest. When Chiana and Jewel go missing, an alien with information on their whereabouts approaches Crichton. The idea of a pleasure planet sounds scintillating.
And I just want to point out that weird alien that you just brought up is Ben Browder's wife. Again.
We got a Francesca
for her
there she
season
is.
appearance. Go Fran.
Wonderful. Season 3, Episode 14, Infinite Possibilities, Part 1, Daedalus Demands. An ancient appears and accuses Crichton of sharing wormhole technology with the Charids, a vicious race that formed an alliance with the Scarens.
Ooh.
Dun, dun, dun.
Scaring stuff.
I just want to say that these are my favorite titles in the whole show so far. Season 3, Episode 15, Infinite Possibilities, Part 2, Icarus Abides.
Ooh.
The ancient Jack unlocks the secrets to wormhole technology in Crichton's mind, allowing them to build a weapon that can destroy the Scaren.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Ruh-roh, Shaggy. Looks like we got a hot one. Yeah, so I forgot that I'm the
As
host.
they always say on Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, Ruh-roh, Shaggy, it looks like we have got one hot one here. Like Scoob! Anyways, that was ScapeChatz for this week. Omens, thank you so much for joining us for our discussion of Meltdown.
You are very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it was a good time. Let's do some housekeeping. You can email the show at scapechats@gmail.com with your long-form questions and comments and all that fun stuff. You can post on the Reddit thread that we put up every week at reddit.com/r/Farscape. And we can be followed on Twitter at ScapeChatz, where you can send us shorter messages. Magellan, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, they can find me on Twitter at JustAFluke. That's JUSTAPFLUKE.
Excellent. Omens, do you have anything you'd like to plug or places for people to follow you on the internet?
Yes. You can find me on Twitter at oldasyouromens, as per usual. Yes. And my Tumblr is chasingtheskyline.tumblr.com for like messages and questions and whatever. Just hit me up. Yeah. I love talking about the show. So you can find me there.
I always forget to mention our Tumblr at scapechats.tumblr.com. It's mostly where I put episodes, but I think like once we're done, I'm gonna just make it a GIF farm, and we're just gonna be I'm gonna be the sketchy GIF boy. And I can also be found at twitter.com/Alan Ibrahim, spelled ALLENIBRAHIM. I think that's gonna do it for ScapeChatz this week, folks. And let's get the frell out of here.